L'Égypte. Lorsque l'archéologue Howard Carter jeta un premier coup d'œil à travers l'ouverture de la porte scellée de la tombe de Toutankhamon et aperçut des merveilles, il était loin d'imaginer ce qu'il allait déclencher. Partout se souvenait-il des étincelles d'or. Cette vision spectaculaire envoûta et enflamma l'imagination d'un monde souffrant des sombres conséquences de la Première Guerre mondiale. Ce fut le roi Toutankhamon qui se chargea d'illuminer ces ténèbres. Les feux de l'or. Du jour au lendemain, l'Égypte était omniprésente. Bien que l'Occident eût déjà connu quelques renaissances de l'ancienne Égypte, aucune n'avait été comparable à celle-ci. Il n'était désormais plus nécessaire de connaître Toutankhamon et son époque pour y participer. Il suffisait de s'asseoir et de jouir du spectacle. Les cinémas ou les palais de rêve, comme celui-ci, le théâtre Fox à Atlanta en Géorgie, construit dans les années 20, ne mirent guère de temps à aborder les sujets égyptiens et à satisfaire ainsi les besoins d'un public nouveau et nombreux. Certains films d'inspiration égyptienne projetés dans ces palais étaient réellement spectaculaires. Lorsque Cecil B. DeMille préparait son film épique sur l'exode d'Égypte, il contacta son bureau de production au Caire afin d'obtenir toute l'information visuelle possible sur les trésors que contenait la tombe. On eut grand-peine à le convaincre de ne pas faire apparaître Toutankhamon en personne, chassant le peuple d'Israël sur la mer Rouge. En fin de compte, les 10 commandements offrirent à leur public une série d'images de luxe inimaginables, pleines de fantaisie exotique et de la splendeur parfumée d'Orient, plutôt qu'une vision réaliste de l'ancienne Égypte. Entre-temps, dans la chaleur étouffante de la vallée des rois, Carter et son équipe continuaient leur long et pénible travail d'archéologue. Le soigneux étiquetage, la conservation, le catalogage et le transport des objets trouvés dans la tombe. Mais l'imagination du public, motivée par la presse, ne sut être patiente à l'égard de tous ces détails. Le public exigeait le spectacle sur le champ. Tandis que les archéologues poursuivaient leur tâche méticuleuse à un rythme qui leur était propre, la situation arriva à un point critique. L'épreuve de force entre Carter et le visage public de Toutankhamon n'eut pas lieu dans les profondeurs de la vallée des rois, ni même au Caire, mais dans un endroit des plus invraisemblables, ici à Wembley, à Londres. Un nouveau stade venait d'être inauguré en vue de la grande exposition de l'Empire britannique de 1924. Carter, furieux, découvrit, dans un coin de la fête foraine faisant partie de l'exposition, entre l'attraction de Jack et de Jill et celle de la machine volante, qu'une copie exacte de la tombe de Toutankhamon, de sa tombe, avait été construite à la hâte. Pour le prix d'un shilling et 3 pence, les enfants moitié prix, les visiteurs défilaient, bouche bée, devant les copies dorées des trésors de l'antichambre. Carter ordonna immédiatement à ses avocats de mettre fin à ce spectacle à 3 sous qui dégradait la portée de sa découverte et qui, de surcroît, constituait une violation flagrante de ses droits d'auteur. En effet, les dessins utilisés pour la confection des copies avaient sans doute été inspirés par les photographies officielles prises à l'intérieur de la tombe. La veille de l'inauguration de l'exposition, Carter essayait encore désespérément de faire fermer la tombe de Wembley. Mais les directeurs de la fête foraine arguèrent qu'ils avaient utilisé des photos d'amateurs prises de l'extérieur de la vraie tombe. Les essais de l'archéologue pour endiguer la vague de toute manie qui déferla sur l'Europe et l'Amérique depuis la découverte de la tombe en novembre 1922 s'avérèrent inutiles. Il était déjà trop tard. Carter, anglais victorien jusqu'au bout des ongles, n'avait tout simplement pas compris combien le monde occidental avait changé depuis les découvertes égyptiennes antérieures, caractérisées par leur distinction et par leur érudition. La Toutmanie avait eu, en effet, des ancêtres de choix. Ce fut l'expédition égyptienne de 1798, menée par le général Napoléon Bonaparte, alors âgé de 28 ans, à la tête de l'armée française, qui instaura le style de la Renaissance égyptienne en tant que telle. Après la bataille des Pyramides, livrée contre l'armée des Mamelouks, dont il sortit victorieux, Napoléon se rendit au monument de Gizeh et les visita publiquement. Ce fut une grande journée au cours de laquelle Napoléon prononça la célèbre phrase « Soldats de France, de haut de ces pyramides, 40 siècles d'histoire vous contemplent ». Il grimpa jusqu'au sommet de la grande pyramide, en fit un croquis comme souvenir, fut présenté à une momie et déclara que sa mission consistait ni plus ni moins qu'à nourrir la culture européenne de toutes les leçons de l'ancienne Égypte. La Belle au bois dormant venait d'être enfin réveillée par son jeune et impétueux prince charmant. Telle était du moins la façon dont Napoléon voyait la situation. Il voulait associer son régime à la grandeur et à la permanence de l'époque pharaonienne. Ses artistes et ses ingénieurs furent chargés de trouver l'information la plus pertinente possible, de la dessiner, de la mesurer et parfois de l'emporter avec eux en France. Pour commémorer ce noble projet, ils préparèrent une œuvre magnifique et historique, dont la publication transformerait l'intérêt d'antiquaire porté sur l'ancienne Égypte en une mode reconnue par toute la société en général.
Regardez cette gravure, par exemple, qui est en pleine page, en couleur. L'intérieur d'un temple, c'est Luxor-Karnak.
Ce beau livre devint un véritable manuel de style pour l'aristocratie. Entre-temps, bien que l'Angleterre et la France furent en guerre, le style du Nil traversa la Manche et fut même arboré par le prince régent qui s'occupait à ce moment-là de l'élaboration des plans de son pavillon royal à Brighton. Pour la décoration des intérieurs, le style égyptien figurait pour les classes aisées. Il s'agit d'un étrange mélange de formes, inspiré par les récentes découvertes égyptiennes et de pure fantaisie.
Sense of fun. I mean, they're full of Egyptian motifs, but they're not used in the way that the Egyptians would have used them. I mean, for example, they've got the kingly cobras rearing up. We've got perhaps little ankh, symbols of life, and obelisks, and all these mock hieroglyphics. Of course, these are not real hieroglyphics. At this stage, the code hadn't been cracked.
Au cours du XIXe siècle, le style du Nil se répandit dans les rues les plus huppées et les édifices publics les plus majestueux et exclusifs d'Europe. Les villes modernes n'eurent rien à envier aux monuments de l'Antiquité. Avec l'arrivée du XXe siècle et de son esthétique à tendance criarde, L'impact des découvertes de Carter, qui ne devait intéresser selon lui que les égyptologues et les connaisseurs, atteignit des sphères inattendues et du coup acquit des connotations d'un goût douteux. Aux Folies Bergères, ici, à Paris, l'été 1924 offrit une nouvelle attraction appelée les légendes du Nil. Les gens qui sortaient du restaurant après l'entracte pouvaient jouir de la vue des merveilles de Carter, transformées en toile de fond pour une série de tableaux vivants et rutilants du nightclub. Les légendes du Nil allaient donner aux plumes d'autruche une signification très particulière. Ainsi, la Renaissance égyptienne des années 20 fut répandue à tort et à travers, avec bien plus de force qu'auparavant par de nouveaux médias. Cet intérêt populaire s'avéra pour Carter à la fois agaçant et tout à fait incompréhensible. La tâche de compréhension, de catalogage et de consignation du contenu de la tombe allait durer 10 ans, mais dans le monde somptueux de la haute couture parisienne des années 20, tout allait beaucoup plus vite. La maison Cartier avait été fascinée depuis longtemps par l'ancienne Égypte, où elle trouvait source d'inspiration pour ses dessins. Mais cette fois-ci, Pierre Cartier prédit que les bijoux de Toutankhamon, en forme de fleurs de lotus et de scarabée, provoqueraient des changements radicaux dans le monde de la mode.
It was typical for Cartier to use strong opposition of colors, and especially green and blue from the very early time of Art Deco. This is also why probably this symmetric this geometric art, Egyptian art, had much more appeal to Cartier than the Art Nouveau. It's this immense beauty, this immense simplicity, and the magnificent Egyptian goddess.
Quelques semaines après la découverte, qui avait fait la une des journaux, la toute-manie envahit les collections dans les défilés de mode du printemps 1923, et partout où les jeunes beautés se réunissaient pour s'amuser aux accents du foxtrot de Toutankhamon. Les robes à taille basse, drapées et plissées, les bandes d'étoffe autour des hanches, les bandeaux et tous les symboles égyptiens en général faisaient fureur.
Tutankhamun has thrown aside his sand bedclothes to find himself confronted by a modern lady affecting an Egyptian silhouette. She is wearing this season a Luxor evening gown, or a Carnarvon frock, or a Tutankhamun hat, or a mummy wrap. The fashion trade all over the world is pleading for Tutankhamun designs.
Pharaon, lotus et sphinx étaient partout. Une maison de couture de New York offrit 250 000 $ pour l'obtention du droit d'utilisation du nom de Toutankhamon comme marque de fabrique. La proposition fut rejetée avec mépris. Les artistes décoratifs d'avant-garde constatèrent l'énorme potentiel de l'esthétique égyptienne. Ce fut grâce à l'utilisation d'Égypte comme fondement d'une forme d'expression moderne qu'ils passèrent à la postérité.
1300, l'enchèrement à la 1300. Je dis à 1300. À des 1300.
Le nouveau style de l'art déco transforma les merveilles de Carter en objets aux couleurs vives, clairsemés de triangles, de disques, de zigzags et d'autres formes d'inspiration égyptienne. Leur style était abstrait, bidimensionnel et bariolé. L'Antiquité égyptienne fournit de plus le langage visuel du futur. En 1926, Metropolis, le chef-d'œuvre de la science-fiction de Fritz Lang, dépeignit le divertissement érotique des hommes comme étant à la fois moderne et ancien. Le monument le plus permanent et le plus imposant, reflétant l'engouement créé par Toutankhamon, se trouve ici, à l'édifice Chrysler de New York, construit entre 1928 et 1930. Le vestibule a été conservé intact, recouvert de références égyptiennes suivant la mode des années 20, réinterprétées dans le style déco. Une profusion de pyramides et de fleurs de lotus chantant les louanges de l'industrie de la production d'automobiles en série. Il s'agit d'une sorte de tombeau à la base d'un obélisque au cœur de la ville la plus moderne du monde. À cette époque, alors que la tombe livrait ses derniers secrets, même Carter commençait à reconnaître que sa portée strictement historique était moins importante que son impact purement visuel. Les objets étaient le message. Il n'y avait donc aucun moyen de contrôler la façon dont ceux-ci seraient utilisés et manipulés dans le domaine public.
Oh, these are cigarette ads, things that were, the cigarette companies often had connections and they had little cards that they put in tobacco. This is specifically for Tutankhamun. There's Carter with a candle. When Tutankhamun was discovered and they finally got in and saw what they were, the linen chest, which I have a photo of it over there,
Right.
The linen chest of Tutankhamun, this is the chest, a real replica showing the detail, and you would keep your cigarettes inside.
Fantastic.
One of the most ephemeral things I have is this soap.
You've got plenty, actually.
Yes, yes, yes. Some of it should be very ephemeral, I'm sure. But one of the things is this soap. It's a mummy soap, and it came in its own little coffin, anthropoid coffin, and it is the soap. But can you imagine washing with that thing?
Oh, that's amazing.
I mean, just washing with it must have been fantastic. Another thing during the 30s and 20s was the fruit can labels, and fruit art was beautiful then during the period. And for example, you got things with Egyptian themes like Daniel's Pride, which is offends everybody because it's pork and beans. So the Muslims wouldn't like it, the Jews couldn't eat it, but it still had a pyramid.
Daniel's Pride, yeah.
Right, so it had a pyramid, but it was okay. And my favorite, though, is this one over here, is King Tut Lemons, which has absolutely no Egyptian image at all, but the name would do it, you know, just saying King Tut, and that was enough.
Yeah. Actually, the style's rather like your poster over there, Carter the Great, some sort of magician. It has that kind of graphic style of packaging of the period.
Yes, Carter was a magician with that name before the discovery of the tomb, but then when the tomb was discovered, he made the Egyptian connection and said, you know, Carter the Great sweeps away the mysteries of Egypt.
La danse du sable du music-hall britannique est, on ne peut, plus éloignée du style raffiné, sophistiqué et princier de l'Égypte napoléonienne. Entre-temps, un hommage inespéré à Toutankhamon avait eu lieu à Moscou. En effet, le leader de la révolution russe, Vladimir Ilyich Lénine, mourut précisément au moment où Carter menait à bout le démantèlement du tombeau du pharaon. Le corps de Lénine fut préservé à l'aide de méthodes développées par les Égyptiens de l'Antiquité. Les pèlerins pouvaient donc, depuis ce jour-là, démontrer leur solidarité en visitant et en contemplant le corps momifié du dernier des pharaons soviétiques, placé dans un sarcophage à l'intérieur du mausolée en granit qui se trouve au pied du mur du Kremlin. Vers la fin du XXe siècle, l'image et le style de l'ancienne Égypte ont dépassé les riches collectionneurs et le public connaisseur d'art. La culture populaire se l'est désormais appropriée. D'innombrables livres, films, vidéos, posters, bandes dessinées et même des paquets de cigarettes ont transformé un culte de connaisseurs en un des clichés visuels de notre époque. Un processus aidé par une série d'expositions internationales d'envergure qui parcourent le monde entier montrant les principaux trésors de Toutankhamon. C'était les débuts de la nouvelle ère du village planétaire. Le roi Tout ressuscita et partit du Caire pour faire une visite éclair en Europe, en Extrême-Orient, en Union soviétique et en Amérique. Celle-ci dura presque 20 ans. Cette fois-ci, la campagne publicitaire qui l'entoura ressemblait davantage à une tournée de rock'n'roll qu'à une exposition itinérante d'antiquités égyptiennes. Les 50 trésors de Toutankhamon faisaient partout recette. Si l'engouement des années 20 avait coïncidé avec la montée du journalisme filmé et illustré, pendant les années 60 et 70, les médias de la télévision et de l'image électronique se trouvaient prêts à leur tour à relever le défi.
The show was beyond art. It wasn't an art show. It was a life experience. It was a circus. It was a very good circus. It was a member of royalty coming. It was a guru arriving, even, right? It was a success from the moment the newspapers began to say it's coming. And already people said, where can I get Ticketron tickets? It started instantly. The United States had a thing for one Egypt. It's the woo-woo land. You know, you have glass pyramids, put your razor blade in, and it becomes sharp overnight. There was the young boy, gold. The Curse. All of these things added up to the Mummy movies, everything, all added up to an instant success.
Les journaux s'emparèrent immédiatement d'une identification avec le rock'n'roll et l'expression toute manif fit son apparition.
It was Stanhope the other day for a conversation with H.R.H. Tutankhamun, just as his much-mitted extravaganza Treasures was about to open at the Met. We found the boy king in the pale pink sitting room of his suite, the delicate sadness on his mask-like face transformed for the moment by something like opening night fever. "We did very well out of town," he said. "1.3 million in Seattle, 1.4 million give or take in Chicago. Total U.S. attendance may break 7 mil. I'm nervous, of course. New York is the experience."
I always wanted the Tut Show. There was not a museum director in the United States that didn't want the Tut Show. Every time I asked any of the Egyptian authorities, they would say, someday. And then, of course, nothing would happen. The man who invented the Tut Show, or at least got it to the United States, was Richard Nixon. And when he went to Egypt on that time, about 2 months before he left office, he was greeted as a national hero.
We have also been enormously moved by the reception we have received.
They adored him in Egypt, and he was with Sadat and said, would you send the Tutankhamun material to the United States? It will show that the Russians are completely out of your country. And Sadat, being also a politician of high expertise, said, absolutely. And it all started by Nixon wanting to show the rest of the world that he could get the Tut Show and outdo the Russians. Nixon said it has to go to 6 cities in the United States, 2 more than the Russians, and it has to have 5 more objects, more than the Russians. Kissinger put the pressure on my president, C. Douglas Dillon. I guess Kissinger said there's never going to be any government funding to the Metropolitan in the history of mankind unless you take the show and organize it and sign off. So we took it. I went over to Egypt, naively thinking that I would have maybe 2 hours with the president of the Organization of Antiquities, Gamal Mukhtar, in his office someplace, pick the objects, sign some sort of a counter-signing form, and say, okay, we'll build the cases necessary for these 5 other objects, and that's it, you know. Well, I went, and I jumped into the delicious slough of despond of negotiating in Egypt. He would say, oh, Dr. Hoving, welcome to Cairo. We meet tonight at 10 o'clock. Then we'd meet at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, as nobody was on time, at a belly dancing place, which he adored. And then the Johnny Walker Black Label, scotch would hit the table in a bucket of ice, and then we'd start negotiating. It was not going to be people to people or nation to nation. He wanted to be paid a certain amount of money, $3.5 million, guaranteed, for the privilege of sending the Tut stuff. They said, I want all your admissions. I said, in America, we cannot charge admissions. We don't do that. He said, well, how can I make any money? And I said, well, why not? You have all the profits on the sale of reproductions and all of the merchandise that we hope to create for the show. Well, it took a long time for him to say yes. Finally, he did.
Le financement de l'affaire dépendait de l'adhésion d'un certain nombre de spécialistes en vente parallèle, tels que Franklin Mint et Hélène Böhm, des porcelaines Böhm, qui transformèrent les trésors en or de l'enfant roi en des éditions en céramique à tirage limité.
When you think of King Tut, you think of a charming young man of 9 years old on a throne. A young boy who probably should be out skating or skateboarding or having fun with his buddies, swimming and so forth. And he was a young king. And most of the stories, they would talk about the boy king. I said to myself, if anything we make of the Tutankhamun collection, it has to be the great gold mask. When you see the mask with its beautiful lines to it, it lends itself so beautifully to porcelain. So we had about 33 objects that we all decided were absolutely apropos for porcelain medium. Professor Frayling, it probably was one of the most extraordinary financial times of the Beam studio, because the amount of creativity that came out of our studio with such energy and passion, it sort of hyped up all our artists and craftsmen, because it was something entirely different that we were accustomed doing, and it was very successful.
We asked the slight dark monarch if his spectacle had a theme. Yes, it's about gold, man. Heavy metal. I mean, I'm quite comfortable with gold. I was into gold when there was none of this $230 an ounce nonsense. Gold doesn't unnerve me, but I'm not most people.
King Tut cut across all classes. Truck drivers came, off-duty policemen came, young people came, and it was a totally new museum audience.
More than 1,300,000 people saw Tut's treasures in Chicago. They ripped chairs, scraped paint, dropped chewing gum on rugs.
The ticket takers will direct you, okay?
And the museum had to hire 120 people to handle all of them. And if you did get to see the exhibit, you may have had to wait 10 hours or more. Why would anybody put up with all of this?
Just to be one of the precious few that have been here to see this and to brag about it in my lifetime.
Broaden your knowledge.
Broaden your knowledge.
Broaden our knowledge. This is a very important thing for people to understand the development of civilization.
The marvelous history, the early Egyptian history, it's so phenomenal that it's hard to comprehend in just an exhibition, and before you know it, books were selling, catalogs were selling. It was a fever. It was the glitter of gold all over. We had to remember, you know, not the little people, but the people that could not afford the limited edition Tut mask or sulkhead.
These people were shopping even before the show opened. Already, one man has said he will order the $1,500 item, this statue of a goddess made of a kind of plastic covered with 23-karat gold leaf. In Washington, the Tut shop sold almost $2 million worth. Here it is expected to do even better.
We had utter control, and we did it like Walt Disney sues anybody that uses even a hint of a name of Walt Disney, right? And like the Champagne people, we had lawyers that would just jump on these guys.
We asked if the proliferation of Tut-related sales objects annoyed him in any way. Well, they say there's a Tut madness, a Tut mania, that the show has been over-commercialized. Sure, we're peddling a few little items, but they're class knockoffs, man, beautifully reproduced for the most part. The Frisbees, the T-shirts, the beer mugs, I just regard these as kind of light, kind of kicky.
I saw the mummy sleeping bag. I said, why didn't we think of that? And I went into a rage with my marketing people. I said, this would have been perfect. Because all the kids had to sleep that night and, you know, in this Tut thing with the zipper. And he produced an audience, Saturday Night Live viewing audience, younger, hip kids, that suddenly had to see this thing. And they came.
Okay, guys, here is the pièce de résistance of the evening.
Oh, goodness me. It's so long.
Christopher, could you move the ladies under there?
Yeah, move the ladies.
This is
I hope there's nothing real under there. This is all
well, there's real food. I mean, what the heck? We tried it once. We'll see if it worked this time.
Okay.
Okay, the mask recreated for the great unveiling.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh.
His nose is missing. He's been deliberately damaged so he can't survive for eternity.
See, how come
I mean, that's amazing.
When he took the mask off,
Yes, the face. Well, this is artistic verisimilitude. The mummy was in bad shape, so is the face.
Yeah, this is good.
But it's a good idea. Yeah, go ahead, give it a shot.
I'll take a bit out of the headdress, I think. My God, I've never had to.
So you mean it's the content rather than the form that's important?
I think that's probably right, yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Is it?
Yeah, not bad at all.
Egyptomania is sometimes inspired by specific events, Aida, the Suez Canal, the Napoleonic expedition, but it can feed on itself.
Yeah.
This Iron Maiden album cover, I think, is a fantastic example of where Egypt gets taken now. This is, obviously, this is not Tut, but it's part of the thing that was inspired by the tomb. Yeah, it's Abu Simbel, but it isn't. It's pyramid power. It's everything. It is.
E.T.'s face. It's like a corporate building as well.
Yeah,
huge, monolithic.
It's all the fantasies about ancient Egypt. It's sort of Egypt as a vector for symbols. Almost anything you want to think of, can come into Egyptomania. Things like Tutankhamun's tomb or the exhibition. Wait, the discovery first, then the exhibition, simply inspire, you know, greater creativity, greater quantity. And sometimes they change the motifs. Tut's head or golden mask becomes an icon. But Egyptomania is sort of a constant thing in some way since the Romans. And then, of course, there are things, well, this is a bit older, camel skin, America's leading prophylactic, complete with pyramids and camels, so even though the pyramids are sort of off in the corner. I mean, ancient Egypt can sell anything.
So this is a box of condoms?
Yes.
That's what it is.
With Tut reference?
Or with Egypt, just general Egypt
generally.
reference.
But why would someone, I mean, why would someone want to wear an Egyptian-style condom?
Why is one of the most common condoms called Ramses? I mean, that's
I didn't actually know
onomatopoeia,
that,
perhaps.
but,
Yeah, one of the biggest...
I mean, especially since he had over 100 children.
Since the dawn of time they have hungered, longing for a dog food with a look and taste like no other, the king of all dog foods.
King Cuts. King Cuts.
Tender, juicy cuts, made with luscious, lean meat, so scrumptiously sliced, so incredibly edibly unique, dogs just go nuts for.
King Cuts.
The king of all dog foods.
King Cuts.
Some stains are really difficult to get out, especially if they've been allowed to dry in for some time. Fortunately, nowadays, we have Vanish, a modern pre-wash treatment for so many of those difficult dried-in stains.
Dans les années 80, le nom de Tout vendait à tous les niveaux du marché. Une des salles du magasin le plus cher du monde, Harrods à Londres, fut redécorée suivant le style de l'ancienne Égypte, et personne ne paraissait se soucier de voir des marchands rentrer dans ce temple.
I think it looks as though you've walked into, say, Tutankhamun's tomb, and you've got all these artifacts in the place, which is what actually happened, and that's what this room looks like to a certain extent. I mean, they didn't really have escalators or shops, at least I don't think they did in Egypt, but so we admitted that the escalator was a modern thing, so we didn't attempt to tart that up in any way. That went into the centre. The big problem was, at what age did we discover this Egyptian artifact in the Brompton Road? Our customers are fairly erudite people, and I didn't want them coming in here and saying, no, I'm afraid you've got a scrambled egg here, no, mate. You know, these hieroglyphs are saying something totally different. It had to be a scholastic thing.
There seems to be a slight resemblance between the Sphinx on the wall and yourself.
Yeah, it happened that, I don't know how, but it happened that I look like the Sphinx, you know, isn't it?
The ultimate accolade would be, if you were the pharaoh, would be for you to rest here forever, maybe mummified in the building. Are you tempted?
I think I will try to have a go at that. It may be, who knows? It will be something very nice that I stay here forever, which I'm trying to do.
So the idea is we're going to hold this separate and then lose this hair so that this pops out.
So that pops out, because I'll bring the hat and we can try and see that it would go on and off without ruining the hairstyle.
Right.
L'ancienne Égypte peut être une source d'inspiration tout à fait moderne et vivante. 70 années après l'apparition de la toute-manie dans le monde de la mode, les plus grands artistes et stylistes se trouvent encore sous le charme des images de l'Antiquité.
It was Andrew that first inspired me to go to Egypt, and he's the world's expert on making all the things come to life by his happy snaps, as one might call it. Would you not agree?
Well, I do like to get behind a good old monument, because that happens to be Ramses, I think.
You told me originally to
Yes.
go and see the Sonnet Lumiere, so that's
That's
the
it.
first thing I did when I saw the pyramids.
At Giza.
At Giza,
At Giza, yeah.
and I drew all the Sonnet Lumiere behind in various stages of my
Oh, it's a lovely
sketchbook
drawing.
on my knees in the darkness.
That's a
Of course, I
lovely
didn't fill it all in. There wasn't enough time.
No,
but
no.
that shows
Oh,
the
and there's
beams
Andrew's
of light.
photo of the
Andrew's
light coming up
photo
behind it.
Of
Yes,
the
the
light
sun.
behind it. I mean, you do have
love
to
it.
see the pyramids. This is at 4 in the morning with the light just
It's so beautiful.
Done on the
quiet.
spot again.
On the
in
spot.
I think one of the most
No
modern
one
sort of
around.
images ever. I mean, architecturally, I think Egypt is way, way beyond our civilization. Architecturally.
Well, Andrew led me to noticing all those fabulous birds' wings with the scarabs in, and started to do those wonderful scarab brooches. Here we are, where he's
Oh,
got
right.
the scarabs and all the wonderful broken glass wings and all the rhinestones on this
What
particular
I did was I
one.
found, it was in the Cairo Museum, they have an incredible collection of scarabs. And I did lots of drawings, different shapes and things. That's how they came about.
I mean, this must have been, I think, early evening, but it's absolutely stunning. I
sharp.
mean, and the curve, you know, on that whole body is so wonderful.
Yes, very
And those
sensuous,
fingers,
isn't it?
very sensuous. I suppose our concept is slightly, I wasn't going to say Ben-Hur, what?
Cleopatra.
No, I mean, oh no, maybe, but I was thinking more of the Ten Commandments.
Oh, yes.
Oh, right. Yes.
Those images, they got it pretty
Oh,
good.
you
I
can't
think.
beat the Ten Commandments.
No, you can't for the river.
I mean, after all, none of us are devoid from anything that's gone. You've got it around, and in a way, it's like apples on a tree or whatever. You're free to
I
pick
think what
and
you do
use
is
them.
like all your things, I've done myself. We draw in all the images and all the feelings, and out comes our vocabulary.
En ce qui concerne l'Occident, l'ancienne Égypte constitue une réserve d'images où l'on puise à volonté les éléments visuels. Par contre, en Égypte, l'Antiquité est inhérente au patrimoine national. Un parc thématique, copie d'un village pharaonien, est en construction dans la banlieue du Caire. La principale attraction, pour tous ceux qui ne peuvent pas se rendre dans la vallée des rois, est la tombe de Toutankhamon.
The wall painting would be put here and there, everywhere.
It's not to scale, is it? Is this bigger?
Exactly to scale.
Is it?
Exactly to one.
Funny, without the lid on it,
Yes.
it looks bigger.
Exactly, yes. We built it on the assumption that more than 80% of our visitors would be foreigners. Didn't include at all school children. But it's strange to say that the majority of our clients now come from these school children. As a matter of fact, when you see how we represented the daily life activities in ancient Egypt, and then after that you end with the tomb of Tutankhamun, then really you have seen the most important part of the history of Egypt in a nutshell, in a very small time. They pay a little amount, but they come in big numbers. Every day we have something like 10 busloads here to see that. And they are encouraged to that, by their schools and their teachers and their masters. They definitely feel a great affinity, because according to the Islamic religion, all these things are forbidden to be seen. It's a heathen religion, multi-gods and things like that. But nevertheless, you see, even the religious people now shut their eyes about these things and allow school children to come and see this.
Cette initiative de construction de reproduction bien travaillée, dans le cadre d'un parc thématique d'accès facile, pourrait aider à décongestionner les sites historiques en Égypte. Il est désormais possible d'entrer dans la tombe de Toutankhamon et d'observer ses trésors tels que les vit Howard Carter pour la première fois. Si cette entreprise s'était faite en Occident, elle aurait sans doute été appelée l'expérience Toutankhamon.
The
Les musées et les égyptologues n'apprécient sans doute pas trop cette initiative, mais il faut dire qu'ils n'appréciaient pas non plus Carter. En tout cas, il est un peu tard pour commencer à se plaindre. En Occident, grâce à des moyens de communication dont l'usage s'est intensifié au cours du XXe siècle, les merveilles trouvées dans la tombe de Toutankhamon sont devenues certaines des icônes les plus immédiatement reconnaissables de notre époque. En fait, le chemin parcouru depuis la découverte d'une tombe dans la vallée des rois jusqu'à l'apparition d'un phénomène planétaire décrit bien mieux notre monde moderne que l'Antiquité qui inspira ce phénomène.
But I read in the book he was the son of a gun. He was rich, but he weren't never free. And I wondered if he was what he wanted to be. This I gotta say, and